Great.
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful.
Okay, that's fine.
I was going to ask what your top, if elected, what would be your top priority, your single top priority?
Okay, first step actually is to bail out a generation of young people who are held hostage in student debt, because that is actually the gateway issue. Young people have always led the way to transformative social change and are leading the way right now on Black Lives Matter, on immigrant rights, on the climate justice movement, on the fight for 15, for a decent wage. So in order to accomplish the rest of our agenda, it's really important to liberate the ground troops for social change, and that really is the younger generation. The second most urgent priority is a Green New Deal, which is an emergency jobs program that not only fixes the crisis of our economy, our low-wage, temporary, part-time work economy, but also which solves the crisis of climate change. And at the same time, it makes the wars for oil obsolete. We don't need them when we have 100% clean renewable energy here at home. And our goal is 100% clean renewables by 2030, which is what the science is now telling us we need if we're going to keep Florida from being inundated by the melting and the breakup of the ice sheet.
Do you think that's a realistic goal, 100% renewables by 2030 in 15 years?
That's a really good point. I mean, it really requires a national wartime scale mobilization. But I think the state of Florida is worth it, because Florida is really in the target hairs right now. And the science is telling us that there is, there's a span of about 100 years in which the breakup of the ice sheets is now expected. But what the scientists are saying is that it's likely to be at the near end and not the far end. So you don't know these things until it's too late to actually mobilize, which is why I think it's important for us to take a precautionary approach, because for Florida, more than any other state, this is a life or death question. We have to err on the safe side and ensure that this magnificent state and the magnificent ecosystem and people that you have and your economy is not only alive, but needs to be thriving. So we don't want to start entering into this territory which would be devastating to the state.
We've had a lot of environmental problems here in our area recently. We have a sinkhole, we have a sewage issue over in St. Petersburg. How important is it that we do pay attention to issues like those and that our government is honest about those things?
Exactly. And I think, it's a sad commentary on our government that they are paying more attention to their big money sponsors, like the phosphate company, for example, that wants to now expand this assault on the ecosystems, the fragile and critical ecosystems of Florida that are so important to Florida's tourism economy. So it's not only the economy, and then it's also the survival of the state, because if the water supply now, the major aquifer for Florida has been polluted by hundreds of millions of gallons of this toxic sludge from the phosphate mining industry. We have to go back to the drawing boards. This is not negotiable. Florida needs a drinking water supply. We need a system that puts people first ahead of profits. We need industries that are sustainable. We can have profit, but profit should not take the place of our survival and Florida's survival, not only as a viable economy, but just as a place that has drinking water and an ecosystem that we can live in.
Well, Stein, I know you were disappointed that you were not in Monday night's debate. What did you think, between the two candidates?
I think that debate confirmed why I need to be in that debate. Their discussion of the war, for example, which is costing us more than half of our discretionary budget, 54% of our discretionary national budget is going into these wars and this bloated and dangerous military. Almost half of your income taxes are paying for it. But what do we have to show for it? Failed states, mass refugee migrations, and worse terrorist threats. So there's another way forward in terms of national security and international peace. We call for actually a weapons embargo, as well as a freeze on the funding and the bank accounts of those countries that are continuing to fund terrorist enterprises around the world. And that's above all the Saudis, who Hillary Clinton herself identified in a State Department memo as the leading funders. Still, all these years after 9/11, the Saudis still are the ones that are bankrolling this. So we and our allies have enabled this mess. We can shut it down peacefully, because by bombing it, we only create the next wave of terrorism, and they just keep getting worse. They're not getting better. So there's a different way forward. Also, there wasn't a mention of climate change. There was not a mention of student debt. The fact that we have an entire generation that's locked into unpayable student loan debt. The biggest stimulus package imaginable is to actually bail out these young people. We came up with $16 trillion to bail out the crooks on Wall Street who crashed the economy. It's about time to bail out the students who are the way forward, the engine of the new economy for the 21st century.
So as a student at USF, I am about yay high in debt. What can you do for me, and why should I give you my vote as an American citizen with the right to vote, with the right to say I don't want this person in office, we don't need another crook in office? What makes me want to vote for you?
So one thing that makes you want to vote for me is that I'm the only candidate in this race that is not corrupted by the money of lobbyists, by corporate interests, or by a super PAC. I am the one candidate who is actually of, by, and for the people, and my record speaks to that. And I'm the only candidate that's actually calling for standing up to the big banks, and specifically for a bailout for a generation that's locked in debt. I'm calling for a $1.3 trillion bailout, whereby the national government essentially assumes that debt and pays it off over the next several years, so that essentially payments on that debt on the part of students stop, so that you are liberated to actually be the engine of the new economy, to take the risks that you have to take in order to create the small businesses, the nonprofits, and the worker cooperatives, for example, to create that new economy for the future. I'm also the only candidate now calling for free public higher education. We know that it pays for itself. We did this before, after the Second World War, when we paid for returning soldiers with the GI Bill. For every dollar we put in, we get back $7 in return. So for as far as young people in school and in debt are concerned, I think those are two overwhelming issues right there. Thank you.
One more question. So, I've talked to some political science professors who basically have equated, that a vote for you perhaps could be a vote for Trump. And, does it concern you that perhaps the better you do, the more likely Trump is to win?
So, the reality is, according to the New York Times, 4 out of 10 eligible voters are not voting in this election because they don't know about other choices. This is the highest level of dislike and distrust for the two major party candidates ever in our history. There's not a new entitlement for big politicians called owning our votes. They have to earn our votes. They don't own them. They have not earned our votes. So I think we want to put the horse before the cart, not the other way around. Let's empower and inform the American voter to decide which way they want to go, instead of trying to shut off the discussion before it's even been opened. Over 70% of voters have no idea about my campaign. They don't know who I am or what I stand for. I think we owe it to voters to let the voters lead the way forward, rather than the party operatives and the political pundits who are telling us that they want one candidate or the other, and the rest of us better just shut up and go home.
So of the 6 out of 10 voters who are going to vote, are you concerned that the more of them that you earn, given that you are a left-of-center candidate, the fewer of them are going to vote for Hillary, and therefore the more likely you are to propel Trump into the White House?
So, I would feel terrible if Trump gets elected, but I'll also feel terrible if Hillary gets elected. Hillary actually has a track record. Donald Trump wants to bar Muslims from entering the country, but Hillary Clinton has been busy bombing Muslims, killing 1 million people in Iraq alone were killed in the course of the U.S. war, which Hillary supported. Hillary then led the charge into Libya. Right now, Hillary wants to start an air war over Syria, creating a no-fly zone, which basically means we go to war with Russia, a nuclear-armed power. And by the way, there are 2,000 nuclear weapons right now on hair trigger alert. And instead of using diplomacy and collaboration to find a way forward. You know, Hillary has been beating the war drum, and you know, part of this surrounding of Russia with troops and missiles and nuclear weapons. In fact, this is the Cuban Missile Crisis on steroids, but in reverse. How would we be feeling right now if Russian troops were on our border and their missiles and nuclear weapons were? Not good, you know. We need to defuse this situation quickly before it blows up on us. Hillary Clinton has shown no inclination or understanding. Yes, she has experience, but that experience is not good in terms of war, in terms of Wall Street, and her collusion with the big banks. The Clintons, with Hillary's support, Bill signed the Wall Street deregulation, which led to the crash and the meltdown of our economy and the disappearance of 9 million jobs and the theft of 5 million homes. So Hillary's track record, whether you're looking at the economy or whether you're looking at the wars, this doesn't enable me to sleep well at night either. It is a race to the bottom between the greater and the lesser evil if one actually looks at the track record. If one talks to young people in a generation that have been locked out of a future. They have now said, a recent poll, like 2 days ago, said that over 50% of young people are now thinking about voting for a third party. It takes young people to get the bandwagon rolling, and then a whole lot of other people could jump on that bandwagon. Because people have had it with being thrown under the bus. They are ready for a new way forward. This is the perfect storm for a voter revolt. Let's have a real debate, and let's let democracy lead the way forward.
What are your expectations come November 8th?
You know, I think it's too soon to say. My focus right now is on informing and empowering the American voter to make decisions, because in this election we're not just deciding what kind of a world we're going to have, but whether we're going to have a world or not going forward, whether Florida is going to be here or not just a couple decades from now, when the science is telling us we can expect as much as 9 feet of sea level rise as soon as 2050 if we don't turn this around. And we cannot wait for decades to turn it around. Science is telling us we have to zero out fossil fuels in the next 17 years. This was this report just last week from Oil Change International. And it's just one of many very compelling data points now that tell us the best science, the most cutting-edge, forward-looking science tells us we have an emergency on our hands, but fortunately we can mobilize and turn that emergency into a transformation of an economy and a world that's going to work for all of us far better, more sustainably, more justly than it does right now, and more peacefully than it does right now for all of us. Thank you so much.
All right,
What can you say about gerrymandering?
one final question, and then we will have
Gerrymandering in Florida. What can you tell us
About gerrymandering in Florida? Well, my guess is that gerrymandering in Florida is probably as bad and maybe worse as around much of the U.S. And it's clear, you know, that we need voters to be deciding their representatives, not representatives deciding their voters. So the solution here is a common sense solution that creates an independent redistricting authority, that creates reasonable and balanced districts so that the playing field is not enormously tilted towards one playing field or another. We need for voters to actually be deciding these elections, not for elected politicians to basically be preserving their jobs and their very nice little, golden parachutes into the future.
What do you think about people's rights to know about who's running for office?
Let me just conclude with that. Yes, in America, we not only have a right to vote, we have a right to know who we can vote for. And that right is being stolen from us right now. I encourage everyone to go to our website at jill2016.com and join our campaign for open debates. In this last debate, 24 Hofstra heroes were arrested to bring their case to the American public. They were willing to put their bodies on the line, because all of our bodies are on the line right now in this election, whether on account of unpayable permanent student debt, on account of these expanding wars that know no end, on account of the persecution of immigrants who are essentially refugees that have been created by misguided U.S. policies, by wars, by NAFTA, by the war on drugs. by the nuclear weapons that are an incredible crisis, and by the climate crisis, which is not getting better. Even when the Democrats had 2 houses of Congress and the White House, what did we get? We got all of the above, which has been a bigger assault on the climate even than under George Bush with drill baby drill. So we are watching the future slide through our fingers right now. We, the American people, are standing up and saying we are not going to go quietly into this dark night. We are standing up for an America and a world that works for all of us. The power to create that world is in our hands. Thank you so much.
Do you have any scientists who are talking to you about the Arctic methane emergency, the shallow seabed?
Absolutely, yes, and this has been discussed in the literature for quite some time. This is another case in point that when you hit these tipping points, as the climate warms, we get to the point of no return. So this is an accelerating problem. Not only are our fossil fuel emissions and extractions accelerating, but the response of the ecosystems are also accelerating. This makes it a real state of emergency, a true state of emergency. So I want to underscore that we actually do have the power. There are 43 million young people locked into student loan debt. As young people hear about student loan debt, it becomes an irresistible incentive to come out and vote for your liberation. So I encourage people not to keep it a secret, let the word out, because it means that simply on the power of solving the debt crisis alone, young people can come out and take over this election and win it, to cancel debt, make higher education free, and to launch us into an agenda and a political power. We don't have to split the vote. We could actually flip the vote in this election. The underdog today can be the top dog tomorrow. And that's all of us who deserve a democracy, an economy, a climate, an education system, a healthcare system, a housing system, a system of immigration that can work for us all. This is not rocket science. This is within our reach. The minute we stand up with the courage of our convictions, we have the numbers and we have the power to make it so. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
I am a Harvard alumni.